Crimson River's hesitation. Where exactly are we going? James finally gets around to asking, after they've been walking for ages at this point. The mood has settled between them, so they've had a few light discussions about meaningless things, especially while James is taking his much-needed breaks. The Crimson River. If the others aren't already there, then they'll end up there at some point to look for supplies they won't find. Also, if we can beat them there, it's a good place to be, because it's surrounded by open space, so we'll see them coming when they do, Regulus explains. Why won't they find supplies? I threw them away. All of them. So, wait, why did you throw all of the supplies away? James asks in confusion, not quite grasping the point of that. Regulus's face does this odd twitching thing. Well, I was stuck and frustrated, so I had a tantrum? James says, amused by the thought. Something like that, Regulus mutters. In any case, it was for the best. It ensures that the others can't use it, at the very least. Peter doesn't have weapons or supplies. Axes only has their hook, and Bernice has her sword. And that's it. They can survive out there, sure, but they're going to want the ease of supplies eventually. It'll draw them in if it hasn't already. James hums thoughtfully. And what are we going to do if we get there and find Bernice and Axes already waiting? They are going to try to kill us, and instead, we kill them, Regulus responds without missing a beat. Just like that, huh? James murmurs. I don't like it any more than you do, James, Regulus replies quietly, swiveling his dagger between his fingers, lips tipped down at the corners. I'm tired of all to death, James admits, looking down at his hatchet, not entirely sure when he became so familiar with it that his hand sometimes feels wrong without the weight of it. Regulus takes a deep breath. I know, me too, but it'll all be over soon, maybe as soon as tonight. We could be home by tomorrow. That's what we need to focus on. And then what? James asks, admittedly smug that he gets to turn Regulus's word against him, back on him. What? Regulus blurts out, glancing over at him. As soon as their eyes meet, his face turns bright red. He looks away quickly, clearing his throat. Sorry, what? What? What do you mean, and then what? James's eyebrows shoot up in surprise, because Regulus is blatantly flustered at the moment. From the question, maybe. James isn't sure. I meant what I said. We get home, yeah? And then what? What's next, Reg? Oh, well, first on my list, I want a long, hot shower, Regulus says, sounding wistful. That sounds really good, yeah, James admits, because it does. His lips curl up. You know, in the interest of conserving water, we could have a long, hot shower together. Do I look like I care about conserving water, James? All right, fair enough, but you should care. Water is a limited resource, so it's important not to waste it. Regulus shoots him a look. Oh, yes, that's the reason you're interested in taking a shower with me. No other reason at all. Of course, James says, with an innocent smile, because he's in a much better mood now after their earlier talk, after letting out some of his frustration. He'd forgotten how good it feels to just be happy. I'd also like to sleep for 3 days at least, Regulus declares, sounding genuinely serious. James snorts. Oh, yeah, that's high on my list, too. You're not going to suggest we sleep together in the name of sharing body heat or something? Regulus asks. Actually, no, James says with a chuckle. Don't take this the wrong way, but if there's anyone I'm sleeping with when I get back, it's absolutely serious. You two are so codependent that it's borderline worrisome, Regulus muses. Do you ever get tired of each other? Literally never, James admits. That's impossible, Regulus mutters. I know it's hard for you to grasp, Reg, but sometimes people actually like each other, James teases. For some reason, this makes Regulus flinch a little bit, and James's smile fades. What? What is it? What did I say? Regulus clears his throat. Not you, it's something Evan said before he died, is all. Oh, James says softly, immediately solemn. Carefully, he sways closer to Regulus to bump their shoulders together. Do you want to talk about it? No, Regulus replies. James wants so badly to comfort him, but he knows now what he didn't at 15. Pushing too hard with Regulus won't get him anywhere, so he just says, Okay. Some of the tension leaves Regulus's shoulders, and they fall silent. It's a comfortable silence, though, both of them just left to their own thoughts, just existing in each other's spaces. They keep walking, taking a break nearly every hour because of James's leg, and the sun is starting to set. They gather berries and eat them. They stay hydrated and refill their water when they come across a stream. They keep going. It takes all day to make it to the field 24 people started in a week ago, with only 5 remaining now. James's leg is mostly to blame for the length of the trip, because even though he can walk on it, he can only really go at a slower pace, and there is still some pain, so the breaks are necessary. Regulus doesn't complain, for which James is grateful. But eventually, they do break through the tree line, the Crimson River and the cave it surrounds coming into view. They stop on the edge of the forest, and they stare at it in complete silence, neither of them saying a word. It's completely deserted. Regulus and James have to wait for a bit for the Crimson River to ice over before they can cross it. His unease does immediately rise even more when they bypass the scattered poles to step into the cave. Its empty and eerie, cavernous way that screams of gutted, hollow things, a reflection of what last took place here. Regulus's skin crawls. "You really cleaned this place out," James mumbles, looking around at nothing, because Regulus quite literally dumped every single thing other than the tables and racks. "Yes," is all Regulus can bring himself to say, taking his bag off and plopping gracefully down on the floor with a sigh. He's tired. Today has been especially taxing. Nothing even really happened. It's just how emotionally draining it was to have James actually legitimately angry with him. Properly furious, and not just bickering or mild frustration. James has never before gotten angry with him, with everything all at once, like that. Regulus has decided he would like to never go through that again, because it had, well, honestly, it had actually really hurt his feelings, which was startling. He learned very quickly that he genuinely does care about how James feels towards him. It's a bit alarming, but Regulus does not like James being upset with him. Regulus thinks he's handling this whole caring about James Potter business really well, actually. He sort of knew, seeing as it's fairly obvious by this point, but he was clinging to the exact opposite before the announcement. He doesn't have to cling anymore, because now he and James can go home. Both of them. So what's the harm in letting himself care? It's not the worst thing that's ever happened to him, like it would be if James couldn't come home with him. So, sure, Regulus cares about James. Regulus cares about whether or not James is upset with him. Regulus cares about James's happiness and sense of purpose. That's fine. Regulus can handle this, definitely. It's all under control. At the moment, James looks as wary as Regulus feels about being back here. Neither of them have good memories here, and this is where nearly all of James's friends died. He hadn't been able to look in the direction where he cradled Vanity's body in his arms, and he hadn't been able to look down at the river when they were crossing the ice. Regulus hadn't been able to look away from the pale hands, and then he couldn't rip his gaze away from the pole Irene died against. "What do we do if the others don't come?" James murmurs as he joins Regulus in sitting on the ground, groaning in relief as he takes his weight off his leg. "If they don't," Regulus presses his lips into a thin line and moves over to sit by James's leg, reaching out to untie the strip of shirt he put around the wound. "Well, one way or another, we'll all find each other at some point. The game makers will ensure that. It's best for your leg if we stay here anyway. Maybe they'll just deal with each other so we don't have to. If I had to guess, Peter is probably back in the cave where we all were together," James says, his eyebrows furrowed. "It's a good place to hide from Bernice and Axis. I hope he's safe." Regulus doesn't point out how contradicting that hope is. He leaves James to his heart-wrenching kindness. Deep down, Regulus knows it's only going to end badly. He's quite sure that Peter is with Bernice, at the very least, and the thing is, Regulus can't even blame him, if he is. This is about survival, and if Peter has turned to the Death Eaters to make it out alive, then, well, truthfully, not everyone is like James. Not everyone puts their morals and what they believe is right over their survival. Regulus doesn't. Regulus wouldn't. If it was him, if it came down to survival, he would be a Death Eater too. Fear and survival are strong motivators, and when they just so happen to intersect, it can lead to horrible choices. Regulus doesn't know if that makes him a bad person. He thinks the arena makes everyone a bad person while they're here. The only exception to the rule is James. He's the only person who could drag himself through all this filth and cruelty and still hold on to his shine. Regulus hopes James never loses his shine. Well, it doesn't look worse, James says quietly when Regulus reveals his leg, and they're both just staring at it. He's right, it doesn't look worse. It also doesn't look better. The open punctures are still there, and though they're not bleeding or inflamed, they also haven't scabbed over. It looks like it's in a stasis, frankly. Like it would finish healing if they had a bit more salve, only a bit more, and then the wounds would close. Regulus doesn't know if Sirius will be able to send more, and he really doesn't think James wants a repeat performance of the previous night. Regulus isn't even sure if he can do it, not again, not when it hurt James so much. Another thing Regulus has learned, he absolutely despises it when James is in pain of any kind. It should be fine until we make it out of here. They'll be able to heal you, no doubt, Regulus declares, folding up the strip of the shirt to the clean side and rewrapping the injury. It'll be an interesting scar, at least, James muses, and when Regulus shoots him a look, he snorts weakly. What? Scars are sexy? Aren't I just so sexy, love? Tell me how sexy I am. Regulus rolls his eyes, but his lips twitch, because, honestly, he's so grateful James seems a little better. Not fully all right, but trying to be. You are, unfortunately, not horrible to look at. Does that suffice? I'll take it, James announces decisively, clearly pleased. I do recall you telling me that I'm, what was it? Unholy. The devil, Regulus says dryly. James grins at him. Well, you know what they say. The devil doesn't come to you with horns and a pitchfork, but rather in the form of everything you want. So, if that's what I am to you, I am not complaining. I take it back immediately, Regulus tells him. Too late, James teases. He leans forward slightly, his eyes sparkling. Do I tempt you, Regulus? To kill you? Absolutely, Regulus shoots back. Well, we both know that's a lie, James says, waving a lazy hand as he leans back. He tilts his head slightly, looking curious. I feel like I can ask now, since we can both go home, but would you really have killed me if it came to it? Regulus says what he always says, what he's been saying from the beginning, and it's much easier to say now that he knows he won't have to put it to the test. Without hesitation. James just smiles. They settle in for the night with the usual routine. Water, blanket, very small fire, both to avoid detection and also because they didn't find much in the way of supplies for a fire around the cave. And what James has come to associate as a treat in the form of their bodies pressed close. Regulus isn't holding him tonight, going back to being the little spoon again. James lays on his side, not on his bad leg, of course, and drapes his arm over Regulus's waist under the blanket, feeling his warm, bare skin against his own. Reg? James muses to the back of his head, listening to the distant sound of creaking trees and whistling wind, almost drowned out by the closer sound of the crackling fire. Regulus replies. You know that other life? James asks quietly. The one where we could have been together? Where we're not a great big tragedy? Regulus is silent for a long beat. Then he says, Yes. Tell me something about it, James whispers. It can be anything. Anything at all. Just, will you? We have a bookshelf, Regulus cuts in, sounding absolutely certain, and James closes his eyes. Sirius built us a bookshelf, and you have the top shelves because you're taller, and I have the lower shelves because I keep all my journals on the very bottom. You never read them because I don't want you to, and you respect that, but you replace the flowers between the pages when they crumble, even when I don't ask you to? You'd never have to ask, James murmurs. I just do it. I know, Regulus says softly. James dips his head forward and presses his face to the back of Regulus's neck. What else? I write little notes and sneak them into your pocket when you're going somewhere, to work or just into the market or even to visit friends, and you find them later. It's not, well, it's short and usually just things I can't bring myself to say out loud. Sometimes it's reminders for something you need to do, because you'd probably forget otherwise, Regulus tells him. I'd keep them, all of them, every single one, even just the reminders, James says, a lump in his throat. I profusely deny that I write them, even though I sign them all the same way, R.A.B., and you just laugh and say you must have a secret admirer. You would absolutely do that, Regulus hums, his fingers moving gently over the back of James's hand under the blanket, tracing the tendons and the heels of his knuckles. Yes, I would. What else? James prompts again. It's a modest life, comforting in its simplicity, mundane almost, but never completely, quiet and safe. Our home is warm and never absolutely spotless, showing signs of life. Breathable because we exist there without worrying if we're doing it too loudly or not. We don't mute ourselves, and we laugh. Every day, we laugh. Regulus rasps. His voice is small and tight, strained like he's feeling too much. Sometimes, before bed, you force me to my feet and pull me in, even when I complain. We dance by the firelight. You'd let me do that? James asks, his heart clenching with how deeply the yearning hooks into him. In that life, I do, Regulus whispers. I let you do whatever you want, and when you want to dance, we dance. Slow dancing? James checks, trying to imagine it, picturing their bodies flushed together as they go in circles and press playful smiles to each other's cheeks. Whispering in Regulus's ear, close and intimate, simply content with one another. Slow and swaying, just holding on because we can, because there is some other life out there where we can't, where we don't, where we're a great big tragedy. And we're so thankful that it's not that one, Regulus croaks. Because it's this one, James doesn't say, because he knows that to say it out loud would only put them in danger. But he's aware that it's true, more than anything else here. It doesn't matter if they're going home. James is aware that what has happened here in the arena doesn't extend out to who they are when they get back. He would never expect anything out of Regulus because of what's taken place here, and Regulus had made his feelings very clear. He can care about James, and he can fight with everything in him to get James home, but that doesn't mean their love story is real. James would like to try, of course he would. He's all about trying, and maybe they could find solace and comfort with each other after this. It's one of those things that could bring them closer together or rip them further apart. And James won't know either way until they're no longer under the microscopic pressure of the demands they have to meet in order to survive. It can't be real, not here. But maybe it could be real at home. Maybe, with time, if they actually tried, if they took it slow and turned what could have been into what could still be, then maybe, just maybe, they could have something real. James would treat Regulus right. He would be so good to him, given the chance. Regulus said James was his first love, didn't he? James would give anything to be his last. Of course he's in the tree. Fuck, Regulus hates trees. How he ended up here, he doesn't know. For fuck's sake, let him down. He hates being up so high, he can't even see the ground. This is bullshit. Because the trees... Oh, how he hates trees. Why the long face, lover boy? Why do you think, Evan? Regulus snaps, lifting his head to glare at Evan, who sits further down the branch and swings his legs with a grin. Because I'm in a fucking tree. I can't even see the ground, and some of us aren't lunatics like you. So we're not exactly happy about situations such as these. Ah, poor lamb, Evan says, clicking his tongue, though humor dances in his eyes. Unfortunately, there's nowhere to go but up. Go on, keep climbing. Almost there. Where? Regulus asks, tilting his head up and freezing as soon as he sees James and Sirius sitting on a branch so high they're basically perched on a cloud. They're laughing as they talk to each other and swing their legs, focused entirely on one another, without bothering to glance down. When he calls out to them, they don't acknowledge him at all. "Almost there, Regulus," Evan tells him. "I can't reach them," Regulus croaks. "I'm too scared to climb. As much as I want to go, I think I'll just stay here. I think I'm stuck here, Evan." "Oh, you can make it to them. You just have to be willing to. You're not stuck, Regulus, not at all. You're just not ready to climb yet," Evan says. "You'll wish you had, though." "What?" Regulus mumbles, eyebrows furrowing as he rips his gaze from Sirius and James to focus on Evan instead, and his breath punches out of him as soon as he sees the spear impale through him. Evan seems unperturbed by it, still kicking his legs and resting one arm over the handle of the spear like it's a prop, like he's not bleeding out. "Evan, you're so close," Evan murmurs with a sad sigh. "That's you, isn't it, lover boy? Perpetually close, but never close enough. If only you would keep climbing." He shakes his head and gives Regulus a sorrowful smile. "You can't stay here forever. I think you'd know this by now, but eventually branches break." With a snap, the branch they're on cracks right in the middle between them, and Evan tips backwards, hand outstretched. Regulus remembers flinging himself up as Evan surged forward to catch his hand to pull him up on the branch on the very first day of the games, and he jerks forward, thoughtlessly, to return the favor. Evan managed to catch him, but now that it's Regulus's turn, he fails. Their hands just graze each other ever so slightly. Evan falls, and Regulus chokes out his name in immediate horror, starting to tip himself forward, only to be snatched back by his collar. Regulus kicks out and swivels his head, letting loose a helpless, instinctive shriek of pure terror when he sees the spider with Avery's face yanking him further along the branch. Regulus can't get free, and all he can think to do is call out for Sirius, for James, begging them to help him, to help Evan. He screams their names over and over, desperate and loud. James and Sirius never stop laughing together. They never look down to where he is at all. The spider drags him further, making him shake and shake, and he's being shaken. The ground rises up to meet him, causing Regulus to roll into the bracing cold, pinning down the give of warmth beneath him. It's moving. It's a threat, shaking him and holding him. Regulus has his daggers to it before he even registers what it is, still hazy and disoriented. "Regulus," says the warmth as the ringing in Regulus's ears start to fade, the world slowly shifting into focus. It takes a second, but it's James. It's James that Regulus is pinning to the floor, a dagger to his throat. James is watching him very carefully, holding very still. "It's me, I promise it's me." Regulus doesn't move, eyes darting around as he breathes hard, trying to puzzle reality back together. It takes him a long moment to regulate his breathing and make sense of what's going on. It was a nightmare, not his first, and most certainly not his last. Glancing back down, James is still pliant beneath him, finally relaxing completely the moment Regulus meets his eyes. He must see some clarity in them, because the tension drains out of his body, and he gazes up at Regulus with his eyebrows furrowed in obvious concern. "You were calling out for me and Sirius," James whispers, his eyes full of sorrow. "Sorry," Regulus says gruffly, carefully pulling his dagger away from James's neck. He's really exhausted and barely has the energy to slip off James's lap where he's straddling him, but he's sure his weight is bothering James's leg, and as much as he jokes, Regulus is almost certain he doesn't actually like the fact that he came very close to having his throat sliced open just now. "Hey, you're fine, stop," James murmurs, reaching out to grip Regulus's hips before carefully sliding his hands to his lower back under the blanket, pressing in and gently encouraging him to fold forward. "Come here, it's okay." Regulus collapses down into James and buries his face into the crook of his neck, hunched in on himself, and making his back into a shell curve as he does his absolute best to fit his whole body into the circle of James's arms as they come up around him. Usually, the nightmares are something they don't talk about. They both have them, and they both have the decency to wake the other up if they see them afraid in their sleep, but they generally don't acknowledge them. Most of the time, it just leaves them sweaty and resigned and so tired. This time, Regulus can't stop the words that fall out of his mouth in a rush. Evan was stupid. He was... Regulus sucks in a deep, shuddering breath, blinking rapidly. His voice drops down to a rasp. He was just so stupid, James. That's why he died, because he wasn't quiet in his tree. People don't look up, not unless they hear a sound that makes them, and he laughed. He swallows harshly, his body held tense as he croaks. I made him laugh, and that's how he died. How fucking stupid is that? Isn't that just so stupid? Regulus, James says, his voice soft as he rubs his hand up and down Regulus's back. I'm not even funny, Regulus chokes out, his face twisted, and then he's clapping his hand over his mouth to muffle the sound that seems to retch out of him. But it's no use, really. Things like this can only exist in the dark, in the dead of night, where the whole world seems to be in a slumber. That way, it's easier to pretend no one can see how he unravels. Regulus tries his best. He really does, but there's genuinely nothing he can do. It just comes pouring out of him, and he wonders why now. Because of the dream? There were so many layers to the dream that Regulus doesn't even bother trying to make sense of them. So why is he losing it over Evan now? Again? He thought he already did this. He can't keep doing this. That's the thing about grief, Regulus is learning. It doesn't just go away. He doesn't just get to be upset when it happens. He has to go on and be upset for the rest of his life. It's not fair. He thinks he should have known. After all, he's been familiar with grief since he was 15. Just not like this. Not death. It's a different grief. A hopeless one. Regulus can still climb to James and Sirius, but Evan, the branch broke, and he's gone. Why does this always happen to him? Every time. This is what happens to him. Like it's his curse. Regulus gets so close to something he wants, and then it's gone. Never close enough. Maybe it's stupid, because realistically Regulus only knew Evan for a handful of days at most. He didn't know his middle name. He didn't know anything about his family or his childhood or what hopes he had for his future. They barely spent more than a day together, all in all, and yet it still fucking hurts, like losing a best friend. Even more so because they never got to be. Lost potential is another thing to grieve, and Regulus knows that well by now. Regulus doesn't need to know more than he already did about Evan to know he trusted him, to know it was easy with him, even in this bottomless abyss of shit. James is murmuring to him gentle words, kind words, all the words that are meant to be soothing. Regulus doesn't listen to them, mostly because he can't hear them over the sound of his own sobs. It's nice of him to do, nonetheless. Of course it is. That's James. He's always so ruthlessly kind. Regulus lets the background sound of James's voice wash over him, feeling it seep into his skin and go deeper, resonating in his bones until they're strong enough to stop shaking. His tears slowly drift to a stop until he's just breathing into the curve of James's throat, his eyes shut, eyelashes clumped and wet. James has fallen silent, just rubbing his back. Regulus lifts his head with minimal effort and rasps, Am I hurting your leg? No, love, you're fine right where you are, James assures him, and Regulus instantly collapses back into him once more, all the fight gone out of him. I've got you, Regulus, I promise. Will you? Regulus cuts himself off and squeezes his eyes shut, because this, with James, it's no different from climbing a tree so tall it scrapes the sky. He gets it. He gets the metaphor now, okay? He understands how it's similar. The fear of falling, the strain of pulling himself up from the safety of the ground he's used to, the sensation of being stuck, the threat of a broken branch that can't hold the weight of what they were, what they are, and all that they could be. Anything, James murmurs, and it's like he's leaning down and begging Regulus to just take his hand. James would pull him up. James would never drop him. Regulus knows that, and still, that doesn't make the fear go away. All you have to do is ask, Reg, whatever you want or need. Your hand, will you? Can I have... Regulus can't figure out how to make his request because he feels oddly juvenile, and it somehow feels like it's not allowed. You want... James asks, not quite finishing with words, and instead he nearly whacks himself in the face in his haste to literally offer Regulus his hand, so earnest about it. Regulus can't explain why, but he starts crying again, feeling as fragile as a butterfly wing. He chokes out a sob and nods helplessly to make it clear that, yes, he does want. He really does. And then he reaches out to grab James's hand to twine their fingers together. It's awkward and a bit clumsy, but Regulus doesn't care. He just ducks his head and starts pressing desperate kisses over their fingers, trying so hard that he's hyperventilating a little bit. Is that better or worse? I genuinely can't tell, James admits, very blatantly distressed. Regulus doesn't respond. He isn't sure if he has the words to make it make sense how important James's hand is to him right now. Hands can be tethers that stop you from floating away, pulling you from where you're drifting up into the sky. Just the same, they can be the pull you need when you're falling, when you're sinking, when gravity is dragging you down. Regulus was 15 the first time he held James's hand, and it kept him grounded. Now it's James's hand that could help him climb, if he'd just let it. Still weeping, Regulus tucks their joined hands under his chin and curls around them, like he's trying to keep them safe in between their bodies. James lets him, keeping his other arm around him, still stroking his back. In one hand, Regulus clings to James's fingers, in the other he clings to his dagger. Isn't it sad how they both comfort him? Isn't it sad how he can't fathom letting either go? Isn't it sad how neither can stop him from being afraid? James doesn't go back to sleep, even when Regulus eventually stops crying and drifts off. The way Regulus had been calling out for him and for Sirius had scared him so much that he's actually a little terrified to close his eyes. He thinks he's going to have a nightmare about it, and he's already woken up from awful dreams about Vanity and Hotch tonight. So he just stays awake. He may have lied to Regulus about his leg, but the ache from the weight of Regulus sitting astride his pelvis, making the injury in his thigh throb, is a small price to pay to be able to hold him and comfort him, and be held and comforted by him. Regulus's mere presence is soothing James, helping him with his own grief. Even when asleep, Regulus doesn't let James's hand go. He keeps their hands trapped between them, like someone might come and try to steal them or break them up. James would sooner chew off his own hand to give to Regulus than let anyone take it away from him at this point. James isn't entirely sure what Regulus's whole breakdown was about, really. The nightmare, he's assuming, but he'd also been upset about Evan. He'd also seemed quite desperate to hold hands, and even more upset when they did. Frankly, James doesn't think there needs to be answers or reasons for this sort of thing. Grief manifests in strange ways, and they both have a lot of things to carry grief for. It's not something they just get to put down, not ever. James knows that from his own mother and from Sirius. If all they can do to help each other is hold on, then James is grateful that they can get to. It was late when Regulus had his nightmare, so it's not long before the temperature starts to change and the night slowly begins to give way to morning. It's still cold, still dark out, but James can see the sky lightening outside the cave. Soon the river will thaw, which means they need to get up if they want to make it across. They don't know when exactly the ice will melt, but they did agree they didn't want to be trapped here all day with no food or source of water. Reg? James says gently, nudging him a little. This earns little more than a grumpy, displeased grunt that, despite everything, brings a small smile to his lips. He huffs a quiet laugh and squeezes Regulus's hand, while using his other hand to nudge him again. I know you hate it, love, but it's time to get up. No, Regulus mumbles and just snuggles in closer. Regulus, James declares, biting back a laugh. Don't do this to me, James, please. Regulus whisper groans, sort of nuzzling into James's shoulder that he's been using as a pillow since he ended up on top of him. Admittedly, James is so stupidly delighted by the way Regulus wants to lay all over him that he would be willing to let him literally do it forever. However, Regulus would kill him if they got trapped over here when James could have kept it from happening. We don't know when the river thaws, remember? It's best if we cross it now, so we don't get A scream splits the air, drowning out the rest of James's words, and it has Regulus immediately jerking awake, his head snapping up as he rolls right out of James's lap and to his feet, dagger at the ready. James is right behind him, snatching up his hatchet and bracing the top of it to the ground to help him stumble to his feet. His leg protests, but it hardly even registers as Regulus yanks up his bag to put on, and then they're both heading for the cave entrance. They make it there at the same time, just about, so James hears Regulus suck in a sharp breath of pure horror even before he fully processes what he's so horrified by. James's brain can hardly make sense of it. Like, he knows that it's a huge spider, but where the eyes would usually be, there's a protruding torso that leads into Irene's face, which is framed by sharp, clicking pincers. The Irene spider is scuttling behind Peter, Bernice, and Axes, chasing them at frankly terrifying speeds, while they all shout and run. All James can think about is how Irene hated spiders. The fact that the game makers did this to her, to anyone really, makes him feel fucking sick. All the color has drained from Regulus's face, and he looks like he might vomit as well. "James!" Peter shrieks, garbling out desperate screeches as he sprints at full tilt through the field, arms flailing. "Help! Fucking help us!" Bernice screams at them, sounding so terrified that James instinctively does want to help her, despite everything that's happened thus far. "James," Regulus croaks, "the river hasn't thawed. Fuck! They're leading it right to us." "Can we even kill that thing?" James asks incredulously. Regulus sends him an indignant look. "I don't know." "Well," James mutters with a grimace, lifting his hatchet with a deep breath. "Only one way to find out." "Oh, for fuck's sake," Regulus groans, flipping his dagger into his palm as James proceeds to run out of the cave. "Axis, your hook!" James bellows as the others draw closer. "Are you fucking mental?" Axis shrieks back, nearly slipping on the ice as they come barreling over. Bernice actually does slip, landing on her knees and fully just gliding the way across like a rock star or something equally cool, when she uses her sword to brace against the ground and stumble to her feet. "Don't be a bitch, Axis. We have to fight this fucking thing anyway. Use your damn hook." "Everyone scatter!" James roars, and they all instantly split off into multiple different directions, which does seem to confuse the spider for just a split second. The empty poles make it harder for the spider to move. It selects a target, going right for Bernice, who is steadily backing up. "Okay, get behind it." Not yet! Bernice orders, through clenched teeth, holding one hand out to hold off Axis, who is running along beside the spider, a little bit behind, swinging their hook. Bernice's other hand grips her sword, doing that cool swivel thing that Mulciber also knew how to do. In his brief moment of delirious disbelief and panic, James wonders why all the mean people know how to do cool stuff. Even Regulus. "Now!" Peter shouts. Axis immediately lets her hook fly, catching the spider all the way across to the other side, embedding in the dip between the torso and the body. Regulus dives forward to grip the rope with Axis as they both pull, actually managing to throw the spider off course at first, then losing momentum when Axis lashes out and punches Regulus in the face. Stupid idiot, sorry. "Really? Is now the time?" Regulus roars in what James knows is a mixture of disbelief and rage. To their credit, Axis does wince as they call out, "Sorry, it was a reflex. You're right, that can wait." "Fucking pull!" Regulus snarls, and then they both do. "Pete, help me tackle it," James bursts out, which spurs him and Peter forward as they essentially just throw themselves at the side of the spider while Axis and Regulus yank it over from the other side. Bernice, from the front, is slashing wildly with her sword, keeping herself from being eaten. The spider wobbles with a hiss, then tilts over, crumbling on its side. James immediately raises his hatchet and slams it down into one of the spider's legs, the grotesque crunch and snap ringing in his ears. The spider writhes, trying to get up, but Axis and Regulus continue to yank it over every time. Peter stoops down and grips the twitching leg James is chopping off, gagging even as he does it, but he doesn't let how disgusting it is stop him from tugging on the leg with all his might, until James breaks through, and it pulls apart. This does go over well with the spider, predictably. It hisses shrilly. This doesn't go over. Okay, it doesn't go over well. It hisses shrilly and flails on the ground, striking out wildly at Bernice. It's getting harder to keep it down, and James knows it's not going to stay put much longer. "I have an insane idea," James rasps out to Peter, whipping towards him with his chest heaving. Peter is staring down at the spider leg in his hands in pure disgust. "Peter! Oh, that is nasty!" Peter chokes out, dropping the leg and shuddering in revulsion. He looks up with wide eyes. "What? Wait, what idea? James, give me a boost," James declares, reaching out to brace his hand on Peter's shoulder. Peter gapes at him. "Are you mental?" Nonetheless, he threads his fingers together and makes a platform between his palms, holding steady as James puts his foot on it and does 3 little bounces before pushing himself up and throwing himself onto the body of the spider. He nearly goes right over the side, and for a second the only thing he can see is Regulus's face red from exertion. His eyes wide and his mouth dropped open as he realizes James is on the spider at the moment. James manages a quick, lopsided grin. "James, you fucking idiot, get down!" Regulus shouts. "1 second, love," James shouts back with a cackle that sounds more like Sirius than him, actually. Weirdly, he hasn't felt this alive and exhilarated in days. With a grunt, he shifts to wiggle up to where he can see his feet under him. Don't spiders have hair? Some of them do, right? Vanity would know, and the passing thought steals the smile right off of James's face. Either way, this spider has no hair. Its body and legs are made of something that feels like leather or rubber, or both, and there's no easy way to grip it. Still, James gets his balance enough to crawl forward and bury his hatchet in the back of the spider's torso. The discomfort from the fact that it's Irene's torso is overshadowed by the horrible hiss the spider releases, the sound of the pinchers clicking rapidly in distress. The arms flail, trying to reach back and snatch the hatchet out. James beats it there, yanking it free and standing to full height to grip the spider by the back of its hair, Irene's hair, to hold it in place as he swings his hatchet with all his might at the side of its neck. That only really distracts it, honestly, but Bernice provides assistance by darting forward to shove her sword right into its torso. James snatches the hatchet back out while it's held in place, then brings it back down. He does it again, and again, and again, and once more for good measure, which finally slices all the way through to the other side, making the spider's head quite literally roll off its shoulders. Irene's head, except not, which becomes apparent when the head hits the ground by Bernice's feet with a dull thud, black eyes glazed over and pinchers still. The spider slumps all at once, still twitching, and James goes stumbling right over the side with a grunt, not at all prepared to be displaced so abruptly. He hits the ground with a groan, his hatchet skidding from his hand across the grass. As luck would have it, he has fortunately not fallen at Regulus's feet, which means he won't have to see Regulus glaring at him for doing something so reckless. James is taking his wins. "James?" Regulus calls. "I'm okay," James wheezes. "Ow." "Ow? That doesn't sound okay, James," Regulus snaps. No, I'm completely fine," James insists weakly, breathing hard. "Just, taking a moment to really appreciate the authenticity of this artificial grass. Honestly, I'm grand." Regulus releases a huff. "You are so fucking stupid. That was incredibly reckless. You could have—" Yeah, James mutters, pushing up to his hands and knees with a grunt. Oh, his leg is not happy with him right now. "Have a go at me. Don't thank me or anything. It's always, 'You're so stupid, James.' It's never, 'You look so sexy and heroic while saving everybody from the murderous spider, James.'" Usually, Regulus would have a bitchy comment lined up for him, but he's suspiciously quiet all of a sudden. James reaches forward for his hatchet, only to freeze when a boot comes down to step on the handle before he can grab it. Slowly, James tilts his head up to see who it is and feels his heart sink right to the pit of his stomach. "Peter?" James whispers, a lump forming in his throat, a horrible dread turning his veins to ice. Peter sighs and slips his foot back, crouching down to pick up the hatchet. He looks at James for a long moment, then swallows and murmurs, "I'm sorry, James." "No," James croaks. "No, Pete, tell me you're not. Tell me you aren't working with—" "Us?" Bernice whispers in his ear, swinging her head around to grin at him, eyes sparkling. He jerks a little bit, and she laughs at him. "Old Petey fits right in, doesn't he? He's a smart biscuit if you really give him a chance. Shame he never got to prove himself while spending all his time with perfect, pure, principled Potter. That's all right. We appreciate him." "Make that mistake, I dare you," Regulus hisses from behind him, and Axis chuckles. "When I get that back—" "Shut up, Black. You're the one who threw the dagger at me to start with," Axis cuts in. "Got me in the arm good, you prick." "Like I said, wait until I get my other one back," Regulus snaps, then makes a quiet, displeased sound. "Yeah, there you go," Axis declares, and then they say nothing else, and neither does Regulus. Peter once again swallows harshly, and there's true remorse in his eyes. "James, you have to understand. I want to go home too. I want to—" "That doesn't make it right," James chokes out. "Oh, yeah?" Peter challenges, nostrils flaring. "I told you, James, this is the Hunger Games. It's war, and you do what you have to do to survive a war. We can't always do the right thing, and you're a fucking hypocrite. You know that? What would you have done to get home? I would have had to die for that to be possible, and you know it. So, what was your solution? Kill me? Betray me? Go on then." James doesn't have anything to say because he doesn't know. He still doesn't know. He never did, and he doesn't think he would have ever figured it out. That, James imagines, would have been something Regulus would have needed to handle. Things were so much easier back when he believed he wouldn't have to live with his own choices. "Yeah," Peter says sharply, "that's what I thought. You can think I'm a bad person all you want, and you can hate me, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm only the one in the wrong because I beat you to it first." All James can think to say is, "I never would have done this to you, Peter." "So you would have died for me then?" Peter asks. "I would have at least wanted to," James rasps, his eyes stinging, because it's true. In another world, where Regulus's name was never called, but James's still was, he doesn't think he would have made it home anyway. He would have died for someone. Vanity or Peter, most likely. A part of me still wants to. Will you even mourn me? Peter flinches slightly, and again his eyes fill with remorse, shiny in the rising sun. They stare at each other, and James wasn't aware that heartbreak took this form as well. He's never been through anything like this, where he realized that his life didn't matter to someone else the way he thought it did, the way their life matters to him. "Oh, enough of all the melodrama," Bernice mutters, sounding bored. She grips James by the back of his hair and yanks him to his feet, putting her sword to his throat. He can feel the curve of her smile against his ear. "Peter's going to kill you, and I've been looking forward to your death for a long time, Potter." "You know, I sort of got that impression," James admits, wincing as she snatches him around, turning him to face, "Oh shit." "Oh, fuck no, Regulus. I'm fine," Regulus grits out, the words barely intelligible with how hard he's clenching his teeth together. Axis has the dagger Regulus apparently threw at them passed to his throat, their lips pulled up into a smirk. The one Regulus had is on the ground where he can't grab it. "Let him go," James blurts out instinctively, ready and willing to fight, or plead, or do anything to get Regulus out of the situation. He swallows, careless to the sword at his own throat. "Not sure you should be too worried about him, Pumpkin," Bernice tells him, amused. "You two are so sweet. Do you know that? Really, it's very adorable. Don't worry, we'll make sure you can say goodbye and have a heart-to-heart and share a cute little kiss before we kill you. We're not monsters." "I'd really like to know your definition of monster," James grumbles under his breath as Bernice drags him over to where Axis and Regulus are. Curiously, the spider is just gone, as if it dissolved on the spot. The game maker's doing, no doubt. "Listen, I have a heart, all right? I think you two make for a lovely couple," Bernice announces, sounding absurdly serious as she kicks the backs of his knees to get him to kneel down, while Axis does the same to Regulus right across from him. "Now make your goodbyes, give your speeches. Go on." "Always got to have a good show, giving the viewers what they want. Even they know how this goes. Because they're into it, too, putting on their own performances." James isn't in the mood, so he doesn't look at Regulus. No, he looks at Peter. "Peter," James whispers, looking up at him with this stupid ache in his chest. The worst part is, he's not even angry. More than anything, he's just hurt. He trusted Peter not to let him down. He needed Peter not to let him down. But that's not how the world works, is it? That's not how the story goes, right? "Don't look at me like that," Peter chokes out. "Do you think this is how I wanted it to go? When they found me at the third fire, I brought them back because I thought we would be able to handle it. We outnumbered them, and all of you had weapons, so why didn't it work? What went wrong? Because it wasn't me. I did everything I was supposed to, and you let her die. We were supposed to protect her." "I tried," James rasps, tears building in his eyes. "You didn't try hard enough," Peter says, and his voice cracks. His face sags with regret. I didn't either. It was my fault, James. I brought them there. I didn't mean for that to happen. I thought you would save me." "I didn't know," James tells him softly, his chest feeling far too tight. He can barely breathe. "I would have, Pete, if I could have. I'm sorry that I couldn't." "Now I have to save myself," Peter declares, his own eyes glittering and bright with tears. "I didn't even think I would make it this far. I just want to go home. And the worst part is, I don't even know where that is anymore. Because it feels like it was with you and Vanity and Irene and Matthias and even your scary fucking boyfriend. So, where do I go from here?" James swallows. "I don't know. I never knew the answer to that. It's on you to figure it out. The truth is, I never could. That's your burden to bear." Again, Peter flinches back, his eyes widening slightly, and he turns away as he sucks in a deep breath. James lets his gaze fall to Regulus, who was looking at him with genuine sadness. He knew. He knew this would happen, and he tried to save James from the pain of it, but James refused to listen. "Can you two kiss and cry already?" Axis demands, waving their hand between James and Regulus. "No," Regulus says shortly. "No?" Bernice checks, keeping her sword right where it is, pressed under James's chin. "Potter, don't you have anything you want to say to him?" "He knows," James murmurs, meeting Regulus's eyes. Seeing them and knowing them as he always has. What Regulus knows is the same thing James knows. All of which have very little to do with their little love story, and everything to do with how neither of them are planning to die like this. Not here, not now. Not this close, not without a fucking fight. "Well, that's disappointing," Bernice mumbles. "Yes, life generally is," Regulus replies blandly, and then he tosses his weight back against Axis, enough to make them stumble, the both of them tumbling backwards. He fumbles to knock the dagger out of Axis's hand, and actually manages it, the both of them rolling around on the ground. "Shit!" Bernice bursts out, once again yanking James to his feet to drag him out of range. "Okay, no more playing around. Kill him, Axis. And you, Peter, kill Potter." Peter is frozen in place, his eyes wide as Bernice jerks James by his hair, holding him still. Their eyes meet, and the whole world seems to shrink down to this one moment. 1,000 things seem to flash between them, all at once. Their first meeting, when Peter, scared and resigned, admitted that he didn't expect to live past the first day. And James was there to reach out and offer help, to offer friendship, as if there was no possibility that they'd end up right here. But here they are, and survival is about will. It's about reason. You have to want to survive, and that means bearing all that comes with continuing on. It could be seconds or years before Peter whispers, "I can't bear it," and flings the hatchet to the side, where it skitters out of range. Bernice releases a shout of anger just as Peter comes barreling right at them both. They all go down in a tangle of limbs, knocked off their feet. James gets hit in the face with the hilt of the sword, but he's mercifully not cut. There's a grunt, and then James is kicked hard in the back, making him roll away from where Bernice and Peter are fighting. Then, with no warning, there's a horrible shout from Peter that has James hastily jumping to his feet. Bernice's sword is stabbed through Peter's stomach, where he's bent over, and he chokes out a harsh breath as he pulls himself back. But he doesn't fall. Instead, he grabs Bernice by her hair, stumbling and coughing up blood as he hauls her up to her feet and gets both arms around her. James feels it hit him only a second later what that means, and he tries to change course mid-stumble, frantically whipping around to see Peter lifting Bernice clear off her feet as she kicks and screeches and fights to get away, but his hold is unrelenting. Even when she slices at his forearm with her sword, he just keeps right on going. "No, Peter, no! My baby, please! You know about my baby! My baby!" Bernice shrieks. "Don't! Fuck you, you fucking traitor! You fucking rat! Wait!" James breathes out, shakily running forward as his mind races, because the sun is up and it's warm out, and not again. Not again, please not again. "Peter! Peter!" James tries to save him. Despite everything, he still tries to save him. Even though Peter did betray him, even though he would only be putting off the inevitable of the burden neither of them want to bear. James can't stop himself from trying. He tries, and just like with vanity, he fails. Peter quite literally body slams Bernice right into the river, which has thawed sometime recently. They go in with a splash, and hands raise up instantly to drag them both beneath the surface. Bernice is screaming when she goes under. Peter is quiet. They disappear together, and James skids to a halt, breathing hard as he stares at the water with tears in his eyes. Peter wanted to go home, but he didn't know where that was. He'll never find out. As soon as Bernice starts screaming, Axes is thrown off their game, which means Axes is quite easy to get away from when the splash echoes over to them. In other words, Regulus gets to punch Axes in the face, which is very satisfying, frankly. Axes is so distracted by everything that's going on, the possible deaths of their last remaining allies, that it's easy to push them off of him, both of them rolling apart. Axes stops close to the dagger they dropped, and Regulus stops next to James's hatchet. They both instantly dive for them at the same time, grabbing their weapons and launching to their feet. Around 2 minutes after the initial splash, there's 2 cannons, one right after the other. Axes whips their head to the side, and so does Regulus to see James standing on the edge of the river, his hands limp by his side. 2-1, Regulus murmurs, drawing Axes' gaze. They still have his dagger, but he still has the hatchet, and his last dagger is so close to him. "Ha!" Axes grins at him. "More 1-1, I'd say. Potter's no threat. I'll deal with him easily." Clearly, they intend to prove this, because they whip around and start running right for James. Regulus panics as he shouts James's name, like it's being ripped from his soul, raising the hatchet and flinging it through the air without missing a beat, scrambling to grab his last dagger in case he needs to throw that too. He doesn't. The hatchet lands true, burying itself right in Axes' back, and making them shout in pain as they stumble forward, unsteady on their feet. At the shout, James whips around in enough time to brace himself as Axes trips into him. Regulus freezes, holding his breath, watching in what feels like slow motion as they collide. James releases a punched-out sound, hands bracing against Axes' arm, and then he twists to the side and shoves Axes right into the water. A splash. Pale hands rising. Silence. A minute. 2 minutes. The cannon. Regulus exhales, his eyes fluttering shut as he deflates all at once, choking out a harsh breath that's somewhere between a sob and a laugh. That's it. Oh, that's it. They did it. They fucking did it. It's just them, and they can go home. Regulus is shaking from head to toe, and his ears ring as he waits for the announcement that they're the victors, and waits, and waits, and waits. Slowly, Regulus's eyes peel open. James is still facing the river, his head tilted up as he looks at the sky, like there might be answers there. Regulus wants him to turn and look at him, face him with a reassuring smile that can stop the fear crawling through him right in its tracks. Suddenly, Regulus would give anything for James's optimism. They made it, didn't they? Why are they still here? They did everything right. They played the stupid games and followed the rules. They— "Attention tributes," comes Slughorn's voice, and Regulus goes very still. The rule change allowing 2 victors from the same district has now been revoked. There can only be 1 victor. May the odds be ever in your favor. The silence is deafening. Regulus can hear himself breathing, but he's not sure how he is. Oh, he's so stupid. How could he have let himself believe, even for a moment? Regulus Black, daring to trust anything that's too good to be true, just because he wanted to believe in it so much that he wouldn't even let himself doubt it. He let himself care about James. He let himself think. He let himself hope. This is why Regulus is afraid to climb. This is why Regulus stays on the ground, because branches always break. Every time he gets so close, so fucking close, never close enough. Almost casually, James rolls his head to the side to look at him, a strain around his eyes. He doesn't turn away from the sunrise, doesn't do anything other than glance over at Regulus with a small smile. It's a sad one. His eyes flick down to the dagger in Regulus's hand, then right back up to hold his gaze. "You're hesitating, love," James says softly. Regulus releases a rattling breath. He hasn't even raised his dagger. He's trembling. His vision is blurring. This is it, isn't it? The real test. Because it's just them now, the last 2. And James is the only thing standing between him and home. He's always said he would do what he had to. Always said he would kill James if that's what it came to, without hesitation. And yet, the truth, the horrible, ugly, gut-wrenching truth, is that Regulus can't. He really thought he would. He really thought he could. If that's what it came down to. And that's an easy thing to believe when he was so sure it wouldn't come down to that. But here they are, and Regulus was wrong. I can't, Regulus chokes out, and the dagger falls from his grip, slammed on the ground, never to be picked up again. He won't pick it up. James, I can't. James's face softens, and his gaze is so warm, despite the pain that tightens the corner of them. His lips curl up further, and he murmurs, "That's okay, Regulus." "No, it's not," Regulus chokes. "Nothing about this is okay. I can't do it. I can't kill you. James, Shh, don't worry about it. You don't have to," James whispers, slowly turning to face him. Regulus's gaze trails down to where James is cupping his stomach, blood pouring through the crevices of his fingers, slipping over his hand. "James, Axis got me on their way into the water. At least it was your dagger, I suppose," James says with a wary chuckle, his throat bobbing on a harsh swallow. His mouth quirks up a bit at the corner, gentle and lovely. "Maybe this makes me insane, but if I'm honest, I wish it had been you." The world drops right out from under Regulus's feet, and there's nothing that could bring him back to it. He's unsteady, coming apart at the seams, everything crumbling around him until nothing makes sense. James holds his gaze, and then he falls to the ground, his legs giving out underneath him. The sun is still rising. It goes up, even as James goes down. Regulus waits for it to explode. Regulus waits for it to go out, to dim and shrink and burn itself up, dying as James does. It doesn't.